Welcome to The Black Unconscious,
a mental health podcast about living, coping, and thriving while Black.
I'm Raquel Martin, a PhD candidate in medical and clinical psychology.
And I'm Dr. Justin Hopkins, a licensed clinical psychologist.
This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for a therapeutic relationship with a licensed therapist.
Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the show.
So The Black Unconscious is like
Right.
name.
So this name, right? The black unconscious.
It's a mouthful, but I do still like the name.
I do as well.
Every time I have
and
to
we
type
actually
it into something, I'm like, oh my god.
and we actually crowdsourced this name. And we wanted to do something particularly that focused again on the African American community, because we both see it like a serious need for, again, resources in mental health to be more accessible to our communities. And so just to put that in perspective, I'll read a couple of really quick statistics. This is from the Mental Health America, which is a community mental health, a nonprofit organization that focuses on community mental health across the nation. And these are some of the stats. If you go to their website, mentalhealthamerica.net, these stats will pop right up. Black folks represent about 13% of the U.S. population, but
It
of
sounds
that
like a little
13,
bit, but how many of that is in millions?
So in millions, I'm not sure how many that is in millions, but okay. I will say, so 16% of that 13%.
Okay, that's the millions part. Okay.
Yes, here's the millions part. So 16% of that 13%, 16% of the black population in America have suffered with a diagnosable mental illness within the past year. Mm-hmm. So that translates to over 6 to 8 million people.
6 to 8, like that is insane.
Which
you know
is,
what? I kind of think that's low. I'm gonna be honest.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because I don't think you can completely account for like people who don't necessarily report or people who don't necessarily participate in these kind of studies, right? Yeah. But so just with the information that we have, like 6 to 8 million people, which is more people than the populations of Chicago, Houston, and Philadelphia together. And that's just Black folks in America who have dealt with a mental health issue. Now, what we do know, of course, is that life is hard for everybody, right? Life is difficult. Life is a struggle. Life brings its obstacles. It brings its challenges. It also brings its joys and its pleasures. Mm-hmm. But it comes with its fair share of challenges. But in addition to the typical challenges that most people deal with, living as a racial minority comes with racially specific stressors. Mm-hmm. Obviously, racism, negative stereotypes, dealing with general rejecting attitudes from the population, and all of those things weigh on our conscious mind. And what research has time and time again showed us is that those racial stressors tend to lead to poor mental health outcomes. Yeah. Now, there are things that modify that, of course, but that those things obviously will lead to poor mental health outcomes, whether that be anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, so many other mental health related challenges that can be attributed to dealing with life stressors, including living life as a racial minority. So just to drive this point home a little bit further, so there was a 2016 study by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and that tells us that that Black folks are 20% more likely to report a serious mental illness, and we're also more likely than our white counterparts to have feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and worthlessness. Yeah. Now, Americans across the board tend to underutilize mental health services. So only about 41% of people who deal with mental illness actually get help. But for us, it's even worse. We're half as likely to actually find ourselves in a therapy room or to get access to services. So there's clearly a huge need here, a huge need in our community, and I think this idea, like the Black Unconscious, our podcast, it's really about us reaching out to our community to do what we can to kind of bridge that gap. So that's the part about it being specifically about the Black mind.
Yeah, especially since, I mean, like, basically we have more stressors just being born Black. Like, you're going to be more stressed out. In addition to being more stressed out, you're less likely to see a clinician. So it's like we have more problems and then we reach out even less.
Right.
Which is, awful. And, we talk about how it impacts the conscious mind. But what about the stuff that's, like, under the surface, like, to me,
exactly,
because we have like unconscious, but is in parentheses, just basically because like that's the part that most of us don't really know or acknowledge. So like we are talking about the conscious aspect, but there's so much more below the surface. Like whenever I'm explaining the difference between the conscious and the unconscious, it's like it's the iceberg. Like Titanic. The Titanic didn't sink because of, what was above the water. It sunk because what was below the water, So it's like you're dealing with a lot of stuff above the surface, but then below the surface there's like the things that are programmed into you, which are the result of like your experiences, and a lot of times it's a result of like your family's experiences too. Like we don't grow up in a bubble. So like certain like things that may have freaked out your parent may freak out you. Like you may have a parent who's like, oh, I can't stand beans, and you've never had beans in your house, and then by the time you try it, you're like, I hate beans, like they're disgusting. And it's like it's because you grew up in a house that's like, these things are disgusting, like we don't eat that here. So it's like there's programming in you, and that's like the unconscious aspect, and that's the part that like most people don't really address or don't really acknowledge. You don't really know it comes out until honestly like something kind of shakes you to your core, or you take the time to psychoanalyze it and like go into depth with it, because like you focus more on psychoanalysis, right, Justin? So like that's the one of the main purposes. Like we're talking about the conscious aspect in therapy, but we're also like delving deep into this stuff that's under the surface, because that stuff's harder to get to. Like it's easy to some extent to see like the stressors, but it's harder to get into the stuff that's below the surface. And I think that's kind of what we'll be talking about, because we're talking about multi-generational trauma, like this stuff that like the traumas within your household, because you're the sum of your experiences, but I also think you're the sum of your families
before you.
Experiences before you. Like we all got that. I mean, like that's what we're living in. Like we're not even supposed to be in this continent. Like we're the sum of our experiences before us. Like we're here because of the experiences before us.
And how much does that like obviously the things that we've experienced, the things that our ancestors experienced, and the things that we continue to experience that are residuals from what our ancestors experienced, right? How much of that continues to weigh on our mind, whether consciously or unconsciously? And so that's really what we hope to get to, is some of this unconscious material in our talks. And Raquel, I think you put it like perfectly, right? So the conscious mind obviously is like the stuff that we're aware of, like it's the rational stuff, like when we're trying to like, it's the part of us that wants to find a cause for every effect, right? Whereas the unconscious mind is like this reservoir of thoughts, feelings, emotions, desires, personal experience that predates our ability to reason, predates our ability to speak, and remains out of our awareness. So it's the unconscious stuff, that stuff beneath the surface, as you put it, that really is the like primary driving force behind our deepest sentiments and behaviors. So what are we saying here? So there are experiences that we have in parts of ourselves that regularly impact our day-to-day, and we are both unaware that they exist and their impact. So here's a perfect example of this, real quickly. So now most people, when you ask them what's the most important thing about food, they will tell you what?
I mean, normal people will probably say how it tastes. I say how much of it I get. But like, so how it tastes. Right. But I want a lot of it though. Right. Like, but like how it tastes.
Right. That's what most people say, right? That is like the most obvious answer, right? How food tastes. Yeah. But your second answer isn't far off too.
Yeah, because man, I want a lot of it, man.
Right.
I eat all
the portion size matters too, right?
Like,
right.
Don't give me like one chicken wing, or like, come on. Like, right. So the portion size.
When you want a meal, you want a meal. Not just right. Not a snack or a tease. Yeah. But what's so interesting is that research has time and time shown again that other factors other than how it tastes dictate whether you rate a meal as tasting good or not. That includes there are other things like packaging design, portion size, which you mentioned, and even menu descriptions. So specifically, here's one example When food has a flowery description on a menu, you're more likely to order that food item and rate it as tasting good than an identical dish that isn't described in the same way. For example, people are more likely to say that they enjoyed an item on the menu that reads velvety mashed potatoes than simply mashed potatoes.
Yeah, but even like velvet, like, come on, like, yeah, it's like, what is that, velvets? Like, that's like, I want some, yeah, that makes sense though, yeah. But I think you also got to think about, yeah, nah, you ain't got to think about nothing. No, that makes sense.
Right, like, yeah. But isn't that interesting? Like, just the description, like, determines, like, how you rate whether it tastes.
Yeah, even, right? Like, okay, so even with the microphones we had, like, my microphone is a little lighter. And when I lifted your microphone, I was like, oh man, this is heavier. This is probably a better microphone.
It's probably better.
Because it's heavier. Which, like, they could have just put, like, a cinder block in it. I don't know, but the fact that it was heavier. Right. Or, like, if something, I see two things, and if something costs a little bit more, I don't know why, but I'm like, it costs a little bit more, it's probably better quality. Right. Like, there's so many things that we code it as. Yes. That we don't even know why we do it that way.
Exactly. And so that's a really benign example, right? Just about food. But we just know that is something that impacts our decision making when it comes to the items that we choose to eat. And so we would all say maybe that we choose what we want to eat off of different things, whether it be the taste, or perhaps even someone like yourself
like yourself,
pretty savvy and knows about portion size. Yeah, no, but we would say we would say that there are other reasons why we choose the kind of food that we do, but there actually are different reasons.
Yeah.
And so there are these other reasons behind our motivations and our desires, and we don't really have a full clue of that thing, of what those are. And so literally every decision that we make and every feeling that we have, every thought that we have is actually just we only see or hear or think part of it. We only have access to part of it.
Yeah.
And there's this whole other unconscious aspect that is more deep, that is more pertinent, that is quite powerful, and in understanding that, we actually become more healthy.
Yeah, we understand ourselves. Right. Like you're more aware. Like you can't really. I think everyone talks about having a like chip on your shoulder, and one thing we talk about during session is like being aware of like what the chips on your shoulder are, so that when you come across something that kind of slaps it in the face, you know why you reacted that way. Mm-hmm. You don't really know that until you delve into it. Like you have to be more aware of like, what's something people always say. I feel like a women daddy issue, something people always say, but it's like you don't really know why. Right. I don't know. Maybe you prefer to date like 50-year-old men, and you like 20. Like that's a deep thing, but you don't really know it until you come across it. Until you realize like I don't know. You look into your dating history, and you're like, I don't know why I always go for like these older guys. Like you have to delve into like the unconscious. Like I'm sure it's not. That's a very odd. That's not from any specific personal examples. It's just like I feel like daddy issues is something that gets brought up a lot, especially lately.
Well, it's a common thing that people call it, right?
Yeah.
And particularly when it comes to romance, right? Mm-hmm. Like there are billions and billions and billions and billions of people on this earth, right? But we, for people who want to get married and one monogamous relationship, you end up falling in love with one person.
Yeah.
And all of the factors that dictate you falling in love with one particular person can't possibly be conscious at the time, like when you're developing those feelings.
Because attraction is the thing, and it's like you're right. I mean, we're not talking about like first time looking at someone, because I always say like you're not really attracted to nobody's soul. You like the way they look. That's what's up. But like when you
when you first see them, right? Yeah, it's like, without knowing anything about them.
Oh, your aura was amazing. Right? Nah, you look good, so that's why I came over here. But like if it's when it comes down to like the first date or the second date, like sometimes, you hear everyone's had an encounter. You're just like, man, I don't know what it was. Like they were good on paper. Mm-hmm. It's just something bottom line. Just like, I really like,
right.
They didn't
There's something intangible or you can't describe sometimes when it comes to your experience with other people.
Yeah. And to me, that's the unconscious. Like it's that's to me, like if you want to bring it, it's like, that's your vibe. Like it's just my vibe don't vibe with yours. Like my internal stuff don't vibe with your internal stuff. You cool on paper, but like this date ain't happening again.
And
so it's just...
I think the same thing happens sometimes when you have that coworker or that colleague or that peer that you just cannot stand and you can't put your finger on it.
Yeah, the few times you can't put your finger on, because most of the time y'all know why.
Most of the time you can't. Most of the time it is conscious, but there are a lot of times when we have certain feelings or reactions towards other people, places, things.
Yeah.
And we have no clue why. And so the whole idea about talking about both the conscious and the unconscious, as represented by the parentheses around "on" in our title, is that just by learning more about ourselves and who we are and our own mind, the parts that we don't have access to, actually allows us to make more informed decisions about ourselves. We can better. We're better informed about who we are, so we can better negotiate our self-interest or advocate for our safety when we need to. All of those things matter in terms of quality of life.
Yeah, and that's like one of the biggest goals that, I wanted to come, that we both wanted to come from the podcast, is like trying to take time to think more about things that may be driving you, but also just bring down like the, what is it, like look behind the curtain of therapy as a whole. Like I think a lot of times when like I've introduced myself to people, or we talk about clinicians, or like you talk about your profession, because most of the time you say like, where you from or what you do. And I'm like, oh, I'm studying to be a psychologist. I'm like, oh, I didn't know there were many of us in there. I'm like, they're not, but I am about to be one. And just talking to people about like why they have no interest in going to psychology, is a lot of times it's just like, there's not a lot of people that look like us. So now you, on this podcast, you have two people, that look like you. And also, not knowing what therapy is, I really want us to talk more about what therapy is. And then just feeling, odd about sharing stuff with people you don't really know. Like, so one, there's not a lot of self-disclosure in therapy from the clinician. Like, I don't do that. I don't know if you do, but also just knowing that you're talking to normal people. Like, all of us are, you're more comfortable when you see people that look like you. You feel like they have a combined experience with you. But just being able to talk on the podcast about like, something as simple as like, if we're talking about mental health disorders, we can go from Freud and his personality stuff, or we can go to like Jennifer Lewis or Kanye and their personality stuff, because like they technically have the same disorder and yet they handle it a different way.
Yes, very different presentations.
So just being like, I understand wanting to have a clinician that looks like you. Like when I found my psychologist, like each time I had to switch, they had to be Black women, period. Like it wasn't even a question, because I just needed someone to relate. So I think it's a good idea to have two people who are clinicians that are able to look at stuff from like, the school side, also from like this is how it says in the book, but this is how it's going to apply to us. And then, just talking about normal stuff, like not just like book stuff, but also like pop culture stuff, because there's a lot of mental health stuff happening with some of our favorites.
Right, it's a hot topic now. It's a hot topic.
It is a hot topic.
We hoped at some point to talk a little bit about some of the artists we enjoy. Kid Cudi, one of them, who's still in our good graces.
I love Kid Cudi.
Kanye, who's fallen way beyond good graces.
I don't know
personally
what's happening there.
And then a number of others who we've had some recent deaths of. Some celebrities and some other public figures, and by suicide, and so there's a lot happening in the world. I mean, so much more that we don't even know of. Yeah, and
it's so much bubbling under the surface. Like I feel like I see stuff about mental health and psychology all the time now, and I don't think I used to see it as much. I thought it was I always got asked why I wanted to go in psychology, and like I wanted to go because like I felt like our community was like hurt in an aspect, and none of us are really approaching it from the certain way. So like I'm the kind of person, if I see a lot of people if I don't see many of us doing it, I want to do it, and there's not that many of us in psych, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna do that. Like can't sing, can't be Beyonce, might as well be a psychologist.
Just get your doctorate.
Get your doctorate.
Yeah, so
and like
easy.
Right, I think that's a good summary. I think that covers everything that we kind of wanted to talk about with our podcast. That's so what we wanted the goal to be.
So you guys know a little bit about us. A little bit about the nature of this podcast, what we're hoping to do, what we're hoping to do with this podcast, why we wanted to do this podcast. Should we transition into our topic for today?
Yeah,
self-care.
I think it's a good idea.
This is a good place to start, I think. I think self-care is a really good place to start for an episode 1. This is another buzzword.
Yeah, man.
Right?
And when Justin was like, "Let's do a self-care episode," I was like, "Oh my god, gross." Like I am so I don't know what it is. It's just it's been used so often lately, and I'm not saying I don't believe in self-care. Like, God, someone will take my license that I don't even have yet. But it's just I feel like it's not described well. And a lot of times, when stuff like psychology stuff gets into the main, like the media or stuff like that, you get to like pop psychology, which is like, oh yeah, Dr. Google. That's what my whole degree is. Like, so I've been in school my whole life since '06, but all I gotta do is Google self-care and I'm healed. So like, I feel like I read a lot of pop psychology articles like that. So to the point where I just get sick of the word self-care.
Right.
It's still a thing though, but like.
Yeah, like the word. I think unfortunately the word, right, because it's become so popular, and it's like this just like buzzword that people are like kind of throwing around and talking about. I agree with you. I think it doesn't get unpacked and packaged in the right light.
Yeah, and I think honestly, one day we should delve into an episode of why like once stuff gets like popping like too popular, we just like all right,
dislike
man, like,
it.
everybody on that now. Like I ain't really trying to do that now, but that's not gonna be today. But it's just I don't think it's packaged well.
Right. But so what is self-care? I mean, to me, obviously it's about taking care of oneself, right? Mm-hmm. And the whole idea really is just that I think we often think about all the other things that we have to take care of, and self usually doesn't make the list or is at the very bottom of the list.
Always. And as someone who works with, I work with children, adolescents, and I work with families. I mean, it's sad, but I work primarily with mothers. Like, I think I can count on one hand the number of times I had a dad come to a session. But with moms, like, they'll bring their child to therapy. They may have, like, both experienced, like, some kind of trauma, but they're only bringing their child, and then I'll ask them if they're going to see a clinician, and they're like, oh, no. As long as my child is taken care of, I'm fine. To which I always say, like, well, you can't fill a cup when yours is empty. So I think it's always ingrained, especially in parents, which is, being a parent is such a selfless act that, it's great that you're taking care of your child, but they're not, taking care of themselves. It's very difficult. Like, your child's in therapy with me, and then you're, like, knocked out in the waiting room because this is the only, time you've had to rest all day. Right. So I think, like, it comes up that you just need to, you can't take care of others if you don't take care of yourself.
Right.
Like, at all. You got to put on, what is it? Put on your, what is it? Put on your life. It's not life vest, man. What's the thing?
Put on your oxygen mask
before you. Put on your oxygen mask first. I clearly do not use that
before
one.
you help your child or others to put their oxygen mask on.
Yeah, I just say you can't fill somebody else's cup when yours is empty. So.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Well, I think the point holds though, right? Like we have to take care of ourselves in order for us to do any of the things that we have in mind to do.
Yeah, because you'll do them halfway.
Right, and so it's not this self-care. And I think this is a big myth, right? Like self-care is not a luxury. No. It's not an indulgence. It's something you have to do. Just like you would take care of a car over time, like as you use it, whether it be washing it, changing the oil, filling it up with gas, getting the tires rotated, whatever the case may be, you would take care of that as you use it. The same goes for our bodies and our mind. Yeah,
because self-care isn't, I think sometimes when you hear self-care, people think like, oh, self-care is, I don't know, your luxury as in like, okay, well, yoga or something. Yoga can be someone's self-care. Like working out could be someone's self-care. I am a complete jerk when I don't work out. It's rough. But that's my self-care. But someone else's self-care could just be like, I gotta like turn off my emails at 10.
Sure.
Because the good thing about technology is that you can reach people at all times. But the bad thing about technology is you can reach people at all times. Like my advisor will email me on my personal email address or my work email address or like text and then like cell and then like voicemail. It's like it's never an escape. So that's also rough. But it could also be something as simple as like getting a certain amount of sleep. But you can't I think the biggest problem I have with that is like people say self-care, get more sleep. There's so many steps between like telling someone to get more sleep and like them actually being able to do it. Like that's a planning thing. Like you can't just say get more sleep. Right. It's like cool. So like single parent, 2 jobs, trying to take care of my kids, get more sleep. So that's gonna heal everything. Like, so how? Like, how do you do self care? Like, what do you need to look at to realize like what your self care needs to be composed of, and how you get there? Because it's not simple.
Right. And to that point, right, because it's not simple, because it's complicated, one size doesn't fit all.
Never.
And it looks different for every single person in terms of how much time you allocate, the kind of things that you do. You brought up sleeping. I mean, some people read for self-care. Other people watch TV, Netflix for self-care.
Or crap TV. I watch crap TV for, not even crap TV, just something that I don't have to think. I got to think all day. I read all the time.
To turn your mind off.
Yeah.
Some people use prayer as self-care, or going to church. Taking a long bubble bath, spending time with family or friends. You brought up exercise and yoga. So all of those are obviously potential options.
Oh, and spending time alone. I always think some people need to.
Yes, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Like, you and it could be something as simple as like being in psychology, like it can be a high stress job a lot of times with your clients. And I found that when I was coming straight home, I was bringing that into the house, being a bit of a jerk, and it was just because I was still coming down from the vibe of working with all these kids in trauma. So my self-care was like, all right, I'll pull into the garage, I'm gonna sit here for like 15 minutes, do some like India Aretha Franklin therapy for like 15 minutes so that I'm chilled out, and before I walk into the house I'm not bringing in like that vibe. Because like when you come back in the house and your significant other, or even like your pet or something, wants your attention, you want to give it to them. But if you're still feeling stressed from work, like there's nothing wrong with like, I ain't going nowhere special. I'm for real just sitting in a garage listening to music for like 10-15 minutes like that. And that's enough for me. 15 minutes is enough for me. So like it's not like I'm taking too much of a chunk of my time. So I think some people need to be alone for a little bit.
And, and I think it's that particular scenario that you described, right, where there's maybe not always with the dog, but perhaps sometimes with another person.
I don't want to assume that everybody coming home to somebody and like so just
right.
You might be coming home to your, because pets need a lot of attention.
They do. They do.
So
right.
Someone whose dog like.
But when there's an entity that's like wanting your attention or wanting your time, dog, human, whatever the case may be, or even a child, or even like you mentioned, like your advisor, right? It can be so hard to put that thing on hold to take care of yourself. I think one thing that that people commonly deal with is feeling like they have to do certain things. Yeah. And for self-care, and which could include like talking to family. Yeah. For some people,
and a lot of y'all, that's your self-care is like hit and ignore.
Right. For some people, it's spending more time with family. For other people, it's moderating the time that you spend with family, right?
Or with friends. Like it's something great about being around friends and like minds and stuff like that. But I think good relationships always take energy, and good relationships take time, and you're giving part of yourself, and that can be exhausting too. So the same way you can feel like a jolt of energy from like hanging out with friends, it can also be a little draining. So I think
depending on who you are.
Yeah, it can be like checking in with people or checking out from people and stuff like that. And I think it takes a lot of time to just not feel bad about it, because some individuals are the go-to person, like, oh, I'm calling because I'm stressed out, or I really need someone to talk to, and you feel bad for not giving that part of yourself. But it's just like, well, I need a minute. Like, what about when the same way you need someone to talk to, I need someone to not talk to. Like, I need to just be with me and all, the voices in my head. So
absolutely.
I think it takes time. Like I that's another thing. Like, I don't think it's as simple as self-care. Self-care takes time. And then just being aware of within your body when you realize you need self-care. Like for me, when I get irritable over like really, really little stuff, it's like something's off. You have to be really aware of like when your self-care is off. Or some people get like headaches when they're really, really tired, if that's part of your self-care. Some people start eating really crappy and that's when they notice like their stuff is off. Like you have to be really aware of like what's going on with your body. So like when I realize I'm being a jerk for no reason, I'm like, oh, something's off. Like I just flipped the table just because I got asked this simple question. Like, so it's just, you got to be aware.
Yeah. Well, I think that's half of the battle, right? Because I think so often like our lives, sometimes we can be just so busy like dealing with the task of like whatever we have to do during the day that we don't hold in mind that you just have to you have to take some time for yourself as well, and you may not hold in mind how all that busyness is impacting you, and like the effect that it's having you, whether it's draining your energy or making you more tired, depending on what it is that you're doing.
Or mean.
But, or
some
mean.
people, like, for real, like,
right.
you know, I have like a particularly really good friend, and like the way I know her self-care is off is she's just like, she's normally bubbly, and then she just be mean, and I'm like, oh, we need a nap, because like you just you know, or me, like I'll just be real. Honestly, I just be a jerk. Like when my self-care is off, when I need a rest, I am a jerk. Like it's just not fun to be around. And it's good that I can check in with myself and just be like, that wasn't necessary.
Friends also help too. Like friends in family members, sometimes, you know, I find that it helps, whether it's a partner or a really close friend, but being able to talk to someone about, like how you're managing your self-care, or for someone to tell you like, hey, you seem a little off today.
Yeah, or you're being a jerk. Like, I mean, that's a very, you're so nice. That's a very nice way to put it.
It's one of the ways, right?
My friend will be like, you need to chill out.
Yeah.
What I'm not going to do is listen to this.
Yeah.
So like, or they'll be like, so what you're not going to do is talk to me like that, because I'm not, or my mom be like, I'm not one of your little friends. You're not
right.
So like.
Someone is like, how much sleep did you get last night? Did you eat lunch? Like, did you take care of yourself today?
Yeah.
Like, did you?
And checking in is not, let me just tell y'all, checking in is not saying you look bad today. First of all, hello. Second of all, like when someone's just like, oh, you look, you look like, you having a bad day? You look like you're having a bad day. Well, I'm having a worse one now. Like, what? Like, it's just find ways to say it. Like, I like the way you sound like, oh, did you sleep or did you have lunch? But find ways to put it a certain way, and then make sure the person that you're talking to is someone who's going to be receptive to that, because like you got to put certain things different ways for different people, like, you know. But saying I can't stand when people say like you look like you having a, like, oh, it looks like a rough day. It's like, first of all, it's been a rough year. Okay. Second of all, like why you like what? Like, you just basically saying like, you look terrible, and I noticed that you look terrible, so something must be wrong. Yeah. Like, and everyone doesn't code it that way, but you got to know who you're talking to, because to me, I code it that way. Like, you may hear, oh, are you doing okay? You look kind of rough. You know what? You may see it that way, but I don't. I see like, you look terrible. You should have just stayed home. So
and everyone will respond to different things differently.
Yeah, you got to know who you're talking to.
You do. You got to know who you're talking to, and whether it's whether that person will be receptive to what you have to say, and obviously just knowing the kind of relationship that you have with that person.
So wait, so what's your self-care then? Because I said I'm a jerk when I don't work out.
I think for me personally, I notice when my self-care is off when I am a little more withdrawn.
Okay.
And not as engaged. I'll be more quiet, more still, less vibrant, just less attentive to what's going on.
Even your withdrawal from self-care is nicer than mine.
Yeah.
Yours is like, I'm more withdrawn, I don't talk as much. Mine is like, I'm cussing everybody out. I'm saying, like, darn it.
I mean,
that's the way this show is going to. Justin's the nicer one.
Well, I think anger and irritability have their place too. Like, they can be useful.
Irritability has its place.
Well, I think there's something to.
I think that's your therapy thing, just being like, I don't want you to feel like you're wrong for how you're feeling.
Well, potentially, but also, right? No, I mean this sincerely, and I think there's, part of being able to take care of yourself, and again, this is why we talk about the unconscious, is that is being able to know yourself enough to know what those signs are that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
To tell you need to take care of yourself, or to know enough about some of the experiences that you've had, so that when you've had a particularly rough day, you can know, like, oh wow, this experience reminds me of XYZ that happened. That was really upsetting. Okay, fine. Like, I need to take care of myself.
Yeah, and that's a lot of growth.
And when we're on autopilot, which we often are, and we're not mindful of what's happening internally, then all those signs, all those little things kind of they miss us. And so I think the same can be said for just like our feelings. I think this applies directly. Actually, it's part of what I already said. there's certain feelings that we have even that are more conscious than others.
Yeah.
So
the really strong ones, like the more basic ones, like the difference between like, I don't know, sad and depressed. Like, I think it's easier for people to pick up sad, but like depression that's a different range of the emotion.
Yes.
So like the more extreme ones versus like happy and ecstatic, we're able to pick up on that more. But like there are so many more feelings than just like happy, sad.
And then there's also anger, rage, annoyed, frustrated. There's ambivalence,
yeah.
right? And I think a lot of times, like some of these emotions can be more unconscious, but continue to eat away at us. Mm-hmm. So I actually think finding moments where you can just feel how you feel, and healthy ways to express how you feel. We don't get to choose how we feel. We do get to choose how we express it.
Yeah, because I don't really think feelings are right or wrong. I always tell people, like, it's not, it's like, oh, I apologize for feeling that way, or, I shouldn't feel this way. Feelings aren't right or wrong. Feelings just are. Where you went wrong was how you reacted to that feeling. Like, like, you're like,
or how you managed it.
Yeah.
Right?
I was feeling mad, so I punched a wall, or I was feeling sad and I managed it through drinking. Like, feelings are right or wrong, aren't right or wrong, but the way you, like, I always say, like, so where you went wrong was, like, you just...
But now to the left. But the dilemma in that is you have to be aware enough of what it is that you feel and how you're dealing with it in order to for so many of us, like, again, because like what we're consciously aware of is limited, like we just know that we drank more than we typically do. Like, it'll go to that. You'll know that you drank more after a particular day that you had, not really able to pinpoint what particular thing led you to feel the kind of way. So that led you to drink. So I actually think it can be useful to find moments where you actually are able to feel irritated, annoyed, frustrated, angry, because that can be a way of self-care as well. Being able to just feel how you feel and being aware of how you feel, being able to reflect on it, process it, and also discern some like healthy ways to deal with it.
So that's difficult though. So why do you think that, self-care itself is difficult for people? Like, why do you think it's more difficult?
So one thing is that, and this is actually like biologically, right? Like biologically, and we've talked about this, Raquel. Like, we automatically feel stress. Like biologically, our bodies involuntarily feel stressed, right? We do not involuntarily experience relaxation. That's number one. Like just on a biological, that's something you have to work at, right? So you and I both know, like there's the autonomic nervous system, right?
Yeah,
that's in charge of.
We all know, like you got the fight or flight and the
the fight or flight, right?
Which y'all don't have to hear, but that's the school stuff that's been drained into us. To break it down,
right?
Basically.
So there's the autonomic nervous system that's involved. That's involved with a lot of our bodily functions, including like respiration, like our breathing, our heart rate, digestion, urination, sexual arousal. Yes, it encompasses a lot of different things. So, and then there's the autonomic nervous system. Well, no, I said that. The sympathetic nervous system. There you go. Sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system that make up the autonomic. The sympathetic nervous system. Help me if I'm getting this wrong here.
I don't think you're getting it wrong. I do think we're getting a little sciencey.
Okay. So I'll wrap this up real quick. So the sympathetic nervous system like revs everything up, and that's automatic. That's what makes you feel stressed. That's fight or flight. That gets your blood rushing to your limbs. That accelerates your heart rate. That stifles your breathing. That's what stress and anxiety is. The parasympathetic nervous system is what parachutes everything down. That's how I always remember it. So it brings everything down. It helps us to relax. We actually have to work, though, to engage our parasympathetic nervous system. That doesn't automatically happen for us all of the time. And so we actually have to put in work to gain a feeling of relaxation, whereas stress is a more natural automatic feeling. So that's
your body
one
just
of the
reacts. Like,
it just reacts. And it's that's a pretty it's just a very biological, instinctual kind of reaction that we have in our and within us. And it's helped to keep us safe. Like when we know, like when something's terrifying, like it revs everything up to get to make us either fight, to confront it, to protect ourselves, or to run away.
Yeah.
So it's useful in so many ways, but it's also unfortunately the flip side, that relaxation from the parasympathetic nervous system. It doesn't come easy.
No, and then I definitely think, especially with, just as a Black woman, like there's always, the Black superwoman syndrome, which is basically like, I can't do it all, I will do it all, and everything like that. And I grew up with, I'm surrounded by a lot of amazing women, and like I feel like they just give so much of themselves. Yeah. And this is just like, aunts and my mom and stuff like that. But then also my friends, like they give a lot, and I always feel like I can witness it happen and just being like, trying to be like, Mom, just like sit down. But then in the same vein, like I'm the same exact way. Like I just want to like, oh, I got like a week off or something. Like I have to do more. Like I can't just like not do anything, because we all know like we don't represent just ourselves. Like anytime I tell someone I'm in like a doctoral program or PhD program, it's like might as well be it's mostly Black women, but like any Black woman I encounter, like they're like, yes, it's good for you. It's not just us. Like it's so many different people behind us. I think I saw one meme on Juneteenth. It was just like, walk like 3,000 years of ancestors or something like that are behind you. And that's because they are. Like, it's not we can't just chill, right? Because it's like, there's so few of us who made it, or who get to like do education and stuff like that. Like to me, that's the part of stress that we will always carry.
Right. You're getting specifically into like why is self-care specifically difficult for people of color?
Yeah, so again, like for us, like why is it really hard for us?
And again, so this is one of those situations where again, like I think self-care can be challenging for almost everyone. But on top of like the for example, like people just being busy, right? Mm-hmm. Just being busy, right? And I think we also live in a society where we value like outcome versus process, right? Yeah. We want results, we want it now, and when we're in pursuit,
your no days off stuff, which I do not support.
No days off, no like sleep, never. That's not a thing, right?
No, no days off is not a thing, man.
That's not how people operate.
No, because then they start your self-care get messed up. You start tripping, and then you're doing work, but you're not doing it to the quality that you should be doing.
Exactly.
Like, I'm still doing it, but like, you're at like a 6, and if you had like an extra hour of sleep, you could have been at an 8.
Right.
Like you just getting it done. You also got to think about like the quality of stuff. I hate the no days off stuff.
But again, right on the top of the busyness, right? There's some of the things that you're already speaking to, right? Like the racially intertwined like things that you and I and many other people in our community like deal with, that make self-care all but impossible at times.
Yeah, you feel guilty for it. Like chilling out, it's just like, man, I'm doing this, but like so and so is, and there's always that comparison.
There's the comparison. Yes,
like,
the comparison.
Here, especially like as someone who's in a PhD program, the way that they kind of program you. It's just like, you did good at clinicals, but when's the last time you published? Or when's the last time you did a conference? Or like, you did that, but have you thought of any? It's very competitive. It's very competitive the higher you go up at all. But I also feel, I feel bad for like taking a minute or I used to. I'm better with self-care now, but having an issue with relaxing or chilling, because I just always feel like I could be doing more. Mm-hmm. And also like, even just for myself, like my mom had us when she was young. So like, it's me and I have a twin. So she had us when she was like 18, and she went straight through to her bachelor's. She got her associates. She got her bachelor's and her master's at like 18. So like when I was struggling, she was a freaking thug, dude. So when I was struggling like during my doctorate and stuff, it's crazy. But the first thing I said is like, it's just me. I don't have any kids. It's just me. My mom did this with like twins, and I don't think we were easier. And therefore I can do it. That's why I'm just like, oh no, like, that's the first thing you think of. And like, it's not perfectly rational, but it's not irrational either. Like, cause it's been done before me.
Right. And what that effectively does, it minimizes the challenges that you endure.
It does.
Right.
Cause my challenges aren't any less just because I don't have 2 kids. It's just like, but.
And graduate school is still stressful, even though you don't have children.
Yeah, way less stressful though. I am not negating that. Like I can't imagine. I can barely take care of myself.
Right.
Yeah, it's just I think there's a lot, and the same thing with self-care with like acknowledging your emotions. Like I can only assume as a Black male, like it's hard with your self-care to take the time to check in with your emotions, because like a lot of men especially, Black men aren't programmed to do that. Like, it's hard to tell someone, like, this conversation, like, why can't you just express yourself? It's kind of like, I always feel like one day a man's going to be like, I did not learn. Like, I did not learn. Like, I don't know anyone. So, that's part of self-care. Right. I think that would be really difficult for men. Like, when you think about it, like, I know how to take a minute to check in with myself.
I think for, I think for a lot of men, and in particular men of color, but masculinity, like nationwide, like are socialized to believe that hiding their emotions and hiding their stress is strength.
Yeah.
That is actually strong. And when you hide those things, you can't quite, like, how can you, if you're hiding what you feel and what you're enduring and what you're experiencing, then how can you address it? You can't address what you're not willing to acknowledge, right? So when you're hiding your feelings and you're not in touch with what it is that you're enduring, self-care doesn't come into the picture.
It's not possible.
Some folks have even in light of their experiences, in light of their upbringing, in light of how they've been socialized, the idea of like having a self that you have to take care of, it's just it's novel. Like, it's just new. Like, that doesn't register. You even brought up for yourself, like, right? You were talking about your mom, mm-hmm. and seeing her work ethic. I think a lot of people of color have grown up with parents or family members who have tried to work hard to account for some of the obstacles that we've endured historically, to try to close whether it be the wealth gap or the class gap, and in order to do that, they didn't take care of themselves. So there's this generational self-neglect. So many of us may have even grown up with no model of how to take care of oneself, with no understanding. Like, that's a thing that you need to get off your feet sometimes in order to continue, that you have to take a rest, that you have to acknowledge, like, what it is that you're going through in order to actually get through it. And so I think that's in addition to some of the things that you've mentioned. I think this, like, this generational, for many of us, this intergenerational observation of, or lack thereof, of self-care, I think for many of us comes to bite us.
Yeah.
We see.
Like,
we see examples of it.
We see
right.
It messes with us. So
right.
I think it's something that can. So how would you say, like, to be on, like, a more positive note, how do you combat this? Like, what does it take? Like, to think about this, like, to check in with yourself, like, what do you think it takes? Like, if you were a patient, you're talking to one of your patients, and you're like, okay, where do you start?
So I think to me, well, particularly like Black folks, right? So let's just, like,
it's called the Black.
I mean, like, let's just talk about us.
All
right?
are welcome, but you saw the logo. So.
Yeah. but I think it's for us, it's about acknowledging, first off, that we have a self that we have to take care of.
Okay.
Right? That we have a conscious, we have an unconscious, we have a psychology, we have a self, like, whatever you want to believe. Like, you are a person, you matter, and you have to take care of yourself because you are an important thing. Mm-hmm. As a human being, your life has value, and therefore it matters whether you take care of yourself or not.
Yeah.
And obviously, the Black Lives Matter movement has become popular. The fact that we even have to say that, right? Black Lives Matter, right? That tells you that the value of Black human life is, I mean, it's not where it should be, right? Within this society.
Which can impact your
care. So on a day-to-day basis, we're getting these messages, right? That our lives aren't really all that valuable, that ourselves are not all that valuable. And so to actually go against that, right? That takes some mindfulness. That actually does take, on both a conscious and unconscious level. I think we get these messages that who we are as people just isn't as valuable of the majority population.
Yeah, and kind of coming off of the mindfulness aspect, I do think one, first point of self-care would also be trying to be more aware of what's going on in your body. So I mean, I feel like everybody knows when they're about to. Well, I know when I'm about to Hulk out, but, like, I feel like when you get into the level, like, when you're, your brow is furrowed or something like that, or you're like, you're frowning or something like that. Like I think people need to start checking in and being more aware of like when they are getting to that point of not just when you're getting like irritable or getting angry, but when you're getting exhausted. Like there's a difference between like tired and exhausted. Like how do you know? Like it took a lot of growth for me to realize like, it's not really like it's different just between, just being a little irritable and just being like, calling everybody an idiot just because like I just need a minute. Like you really, and or just checking in with yourself and realizing that like with you, like you are withdrawing more.
Yeah.
Or you feel like you are, some people get headaches when they're more tired. Some people get back pain when they're more tired. Like there's so many bodily somatic symptoms that happen that you think that this is just how your body is. And it is not. That is not, I'm not saying skip a medical professional, but there's a lot of things that you have to check in with yourself. So I think that's one really big thing too. You need to really know. You need to know how you be mindful of like how you're feeling when you're good, but be mindful of like how you're feeling when you're starting to go off the deep end, so you can cut it off before you get there.
Yeah.
Like there's always a middle between normal and exhausted. Like there were signs that this was starting to get a little out of control, and I think if we don't pay attention to our bodies and like be more mindful, as you mentioned, that you're just gonna one day it's just gonna be in an instance where you just like you pass out or something like that.
No, absolutely right. And the body and mind are connected, like as you pointed out. I think one thing that I've learned is for a lot of us, we carry our shoulder on our stress, and we carry our stress rather on our shoulders and neck. And so sometimes like our shoulders will actually rise a little bit towards our ears. There's this little like T muscle that combines like both your neck and across your shoulders. And they tense up or they rise a little bit, and you can kind of notice. You do these kind of like body scans, as you were saying, like checking in on your body. You can kind of like pay attention to those sort of things to know when your self-care is struggling. So
that's
I think
like the first step.
Yeah, first step I think is absolutely like acknowledging some of the signs. And I think the other thing I always mentioned, like to add to that, is just acknowledging that you are a person that needs, maybe that's step one, like acknowledging that you are a self that needs to be cared for.
Yeah, right? There's nothing wrong with like taking a minute. And some people, it can for real only be a minute. Like I'm not going to say like you can all take like a ridiculous amount of time. I forget the term I was called the other day by my friend, but basically the fact that like I don't have any children, I just have a job. She was like, you got so much free time. It's insane. I forget the name she called it, but for some people it may just be like a minute or 5 minutes, and like that's okay because it was 5 minutes that you weren't used to taking.
Right.
So I think that's acknowledging that you're a person, and I'm not saying everyone can take like 30 minutes to do meditation in the morning. You probably can though if you take out some stuff you shouldn't be doing, but just if it's just 5 minutes is okay of just like silence, or doing like I always I don't know, listening to music for like 5 minutes chills me out. Like you just kind of got to, that's another thing, figuring out what works for you.
Yes, figuring out what works for you, absolutely.
Because music changes your mood. I can't go into work listening to like Meek Mill or Lil Kim. I got to like listen to like something more mellow. I do listen to that. Like I do like listen to that like the first like 20 minutes, because like you're trying to wake up. But like while I'm going into like working and therapy, like you kind of got to bring it down, right? Because that kind of stuff, it be making you think you like for real, like you a drug dealer, like flipping dope and like stuff like that, and it's like I am a 29-year-old
I need to turn this down.
Like so,
I need to turn this down.
Yeah, so I think like you'd be surprised how much stuff like changes your vibe, whether it's like temperature or whether it's like music. Like you can set the scene for like how you want to go about the rest of your day. I do think it's really good to do this at the beginning of your day.
Absolutely. So and like tuning like your music to like your moods, I think.
Yeah. Because you got to be mindful. Like, you be listening to some, like, I like rap, so you be listening to some real intense stuff, and then you walk into work, and you just, like, we ain't got video, but I'm, like, doing, like, this fake rap stance thing. Like, I'm about to, like, but I'm not. But, like, it changes.
Yes, it does.
What you be listening to. Like, you kind of got to change your vibe. So I do always listen to that, like, textbook, like, stuff I want to listen to in, like, the first half. But when I'm going in, you kind of got to mellow out because everything shifts your mood or something like that. Or even positive self-talk, affirmations. I see so many people doing affirmations now. It is just your affirmations.
One of the things that I'm really glad that you brought that up, because one of the things I did want to mention is another aspect of self-care is being mindful of what you're thinking, like what you're thinking about yourself. what you're thinking about those around you, right? Like there's, I mean, we have hundreds of thousands of millions of like thoughts all the time, right? Many that we're not even in control of.
Yeah.
You know, they just kind of like come and go. They're quite automatic, and but they impact us regardless, right? You know, speaking again of the unconscious, whether we're like mindful of those thoughts or not. So really tuning into what it is that we're thinking, the words that we're saying to ourselves, what dominates our mind, and being able to know when you need to change the channel, when you need to start thinking about something else.
Yeah, just like trying to be nice to yourself, or kind of just keep it. Thoughts, I mean, we'll get more into this, but like thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are linked. If you got negative thoughts, negative feelings, but if you got positive thoughts, like you know, just be nice to yourself. I mean, like if you heard someone talking the way you talk to yourself, would you be like, whoa, chill, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like just be like nice to yourself, and it could be like, oh, I am an empowered person. It could just be like, I'm a bad, you know, if that's your positive self-talk, like you got to have some kind of positive aspect. Because the way I hear people talking about themselves, I'd be like, oh, what's going on? It's like, it's self-abuse. Like, be nice to my friend, please. Like, please don't, you know, like, just, I think affirmations and like just something as simple as saying like, I'm going to do, today is a good day to have a great day. Like I'm going to be as happy as like a turtle on an escalator. Like I am just going to have a good day today.
Right. And
it's like, I think a lot of times I used to have a very bad habit of like saying I had a bad day, but I did not have a bad day. I had a bad moment that I just fixated on, and I ruined my entire day.
Right.
So I just think it's just really important, which is something I'm still working on, which is really important to just, you know, have positive self-talk, because self-care it's a daily thing. So like you might have had a sucky moment or a sucky day yesterday, but like, you know, luckily you woke up today, which everyone cannot say. So I just think you need to, when it comes to self-care, like take it one day at a time. Like you said, make sure that you realize that you're worth like taking a minute to like realize you're a person. Like we are people.
Right.
Like we don't get to like plug and unplug literally. So like there's no meter. It's not like we're phones where you can tell like, oh, I'm at 10%. I should probably replug. Like your 10% is probably being tired or having back issues or something like that. Like, so just be mindful of it, because it's just, it affects everything.
Yes, absolutely.
We only get one body.
I'll also say, Raquel, going back to something that you mentioned earlier, just that I think it's really important too to, as much as we can, to be mindful of like how much we're comparing. Yeah,
man. Upward social comparison, like me comparing myself to, social media makes it worse, but me comparing myself to, I don't know any clinician. Do you an example? Who would you compare? What's the upward? Like, let's say, I'm gonna say Beyonce, like, cause I love her. But like me comparing, like, I don't know, me like my income or something like that to something absurd like Beyonce's income or something like that. That's not gonna make you feel good,
right?
I honestly, I had to stop watching certain things like What's the show I used to watch? I used to watch like Keeping Up with the Kardashians because I needed something to take my mind off of like having to actually work. But watching that show used to make me mad because all I think is like, I do so much. I've been in school my whole life, and I will never see it. It kind of just bred envy for me. Yeah. So like I just had to like check out of that. Like when you're comparing yourself, why? Like what's that gonna? And you don't really know. So I think
Right. Well, you know, it's one of those unfortunate things. It's really. It's common, right, for people to compare themselves to one another, right? Socially, that's what natural. It's quite natural. Socially, that's what we do, right? Just we see another person, we obviously have evaluative thoughts about them, and then there's these natural comparisons. Mm-hmm. But I think where in particular where we get in trouble is like what you were mentioning is like, for example, like with your mom, right? Like your mom did X, Y, Z, A, B, C while doing grad school. Yeah. Right? And so you compare that and it's like, well, I shouldn't be struggling as much in grad school because they're having a harder time. And that's absurd.
That's absurd. Right? Like, no, okay.
And really,
like, that's good for her.
Yeah,
like,
right, exactly. And she was struggling, right? And so were you.
Ain't no way she wasn't struggling. Like she was struggling.
Of course.
Like, come on.
Of course.
2 rock-headed kids in grad school. Oh my God.
Right. So even though, you know, we may have, you know, like obviously if you're black, you have people that are older than you that went through rougher times because we've made progress as a society, right? So comparing like what you had to deal with to what your ancestors have had to deal with, you will more than likely find that your ancestors went through more racially when it comes to thinking about like struggles. Yeah. But too often we get into these like struggle Olympics and comparisons, right? Like it's not about like who struggled more. It's not about and it's not about invalidating or validating one struggle over the other.
No, because like the theme for that would be struggle Olympics, like where nobody wins.
Exactly. No one wins in the struggle Olympics. The reality is our ancestors struggle and we struggle.
Yeah.
And we continue to. And I think too often, you know, we when we do that comparison, we end up invalidating our own experience, and we do have to be mindful of that.
Which is also another way of not being nice to yourself.
Yes.
Just be nice to yourself, okay?
Yeah.
Like everyone, just be nice to yourself. Like, oh my God.
Now, I will say, lastly, before we start to wrap up, you know, I will say, self-care is not overindulgence, though.
No.
Right? Like 15 hours on the couch watching Netflix. Maybe you can afford that sometimes. But on a regular basis, on a typical day, a typical week, like most people can't afford that. Some people can.
Yeah.
But you have to know, like, if self-care that doesn't that impinges your ability to do other things that you want to get done isn't quite self-care.
No, it's just like, I mean, let's just not be fools with this. Like, yeah, don't be like, oh, I need to treat myself to like half a bottle of Jack every night. That's a no. That's a no. Or like just sitting down watching TV all day. There's no point in doing that. Like, you gotta, I don't know anyone who can live their life that way. Like, right. None of my friends have hit it big yet. Right. Y'all need to get on it. It's like, but like, yeah, you're right. It's not overindulgence. It's not like, I saw this meme. I'm gonna quote memes a lot because I see them a lot. It's like, it's like I'm torn between treat yourself and like go hard and treat yourself. Like, yeah, it's a balance. Like, it's like you saying, oh, I got to treat myself, and your balance account is saying, do not treat yourself. I'm pretty sure that's what the meme said. Right. So, like, you got to also be mindful and realistic of, like, what's going on in your life and, like, your bank account and everything like that. Or, because, you know, some people will do stupid stuff and just be like, oh, it was self-care. It was not. Right. You were just tripping. Like, it was just, so, yeah, you're right. It's not overindulgence.
Right. But moderation, right? Everything.
We're adults, dude.
Everything in moderation.
Yeah, because there's so much. I'm not an undergrad no more. Like, I can't even, like, I got to prepare for a Saturday party a month ahead of time. Whereas, and it's just like, so you just be, we're all adults. Like, we can't really be doing the stuff that we used to do. And I think that's where some people find some stuff a little difficult. Like, if their self-care is like hanging out with friends and stuff like that. Like, it used to be you could hang out with friends for a long time and that's your self-care. And now it's kind of just like, oh, I'm really feeling drained. Like, I can't really do a whole day worth of things or something like that. Like, I kind of need to pull back from it. Just be, we're growing every single day. So you can't really do the same stuff that you used to be able to do. It's just one more thing. It's just you really got to check in with yourself. Absolutely. Check in with yourself. Be nice to yourself. What was it? Let's
summarize here. So you were saying, like, check. First things, obviously acknowledging that you're worthy of being taken care of, right? Yes. Like you do have a self that you need to care for. I think you had mentioned like picking up on some of the signs that you may need additional self care, whether that's feeling exhausted, experiencing more physical pain. Mm-hmm. Noticing perhaps like the example that I gave was maybe withdrawing more from friends or family.
The example I gave, being a butthead,
right?
Like being more irritable. So being mindful of your moods. If you feel like you're like, man, I feel like that was a bit much. My reaction, it probably was. Like, you probably got something that's off. Right. You know yourself, like you know when you're tripping.
And then lastly, also like finding ways like to be kind and generous to yourself, and that includes not overindulging and not underindulging. It also includes checking in with some of the thoughts that you have about yourself, being mindful of what it is that you're saying to yourself, you're thinking to yourself, and the thoughts that you have towards others. So in general, just tuning in with yourself and being aware of what's going on is a big part of being able to care for yourself on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, good.
So with that, any last words, Raquel?
Thanks for tuning in. This was like, we're very excited about this project. Like, I am so flipping excited about this.
We are very excited. Thank you all so much for tuning in.
Yeah, and just also where to find us. Like, there are so many places to find us. So we are on Facebook. for the Black Unconscious.
That's right. Instagram at the Black Unconscious.
At the Black Unconscious. Twitter, it's BLK Unconscious. We're also on Spotify. We're also on Acast. We're also on Stitcher. We're also on Google Play. Did I miss any?
We are everywhere.
Yeah. Yes, we are everywhere. Oh, and also, we do hope to have a part of our segments. Like, we're new, so we don't have that much of a following yet. But we do want to have a part of our segments where we're kind of when we're answering questions. So, if you can send an email to our email address, which is theblackunconscious@gmail.com, and our website will be up and running soon. And then we'll give you an update when that happens. We always put a bunch of updates on Instagram, and the same things go on Facebook. So feel free to follow us on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and we will give you updates.
Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.